paragraph 1.
Yes, don't touch, yes. All right, you're being recorded and transcribed.
Wow.
All right, welcome. Welcome everyone to our Connecticut Reading Leadership Implementation Council meeting. Today is Tuesday, March 21st, 2023. And I'm going to turn it over to Leslie for our roll call.
Okay, Dr. Maureen Burnett?
Yes.
Dr. Michael Foyne?
Yep, here.
Dr. Margie Gillis? Sorry, I still have to call them. Kimberly Healy, Stephen Hernandez?
Here.
Dr. Melissa Jenkins?
Here.
Christina Kingsbury? Dr. Stephanie Lockhart? Francis Wiggins? Lisa Thomas? Here. And Christina Tice. Roll call is as well.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, and I'm the director of the Center for Literacy Research and Reading Success, Dr. Melissa Hickey. I would like to talk about the acceptance of minutes from January 17, 2023. Was there anyone who had any edits, corrections, thoughts around the minutes?
I have a thought.
Yes.
One of the things that I think is challenging about our minutes is that while they probably, I'm sure, meet the required guidelines for minutes, they don't reflect actual conversation within the council. So they don't reflect the oversight role that we as individuals are taking, and also don't reflect some of the concerns several of us have been raising multiple times. So I think that doesn't help to further the conversation around those concerns. So that if the general public wants to understand what's happening and they look at the minutes, it really doesn't give that picture. And I recognize that there's a recording. You know, as chair of the Coventry Town Council, we also have recordings, but we can't assume that people can know where to find those recordings or have the time to.
They're literally where the minutes are, so the recording's there.
Or sift through those, you know, the time that it takes to sift through recording, people oftentimes want to go to minutes to get their information. So, you know, there are three of us who have raised concerns over the cultural responsiveness of the listed program/models. And that, you know, what the response to that has been, those concerns, including that school districts could take on additional expenses and buy additional materials, doesn't reflect the issues that we've raised. I know I have especially raised this several times. The cost to districts to implement this mandate when a potentially more effective, less expensive means exists for supporting science of reading in our schools. I'd like, you know, one of the things I'd like to know is what's the analysis of this? We've raised concerns about the role that commercial programs or models have played in the failure of districts to recognize and adopt the science of reading research. We've raised questions around the lack of timeliness of adding additional programs or models to the list. Given the current timeline for districts to implement the mandate, they might not have the option to look at future approved materials. Districts are already deep into reviewing the list of models, which involves both unpaid time by teachers and or teachers being pulled out of their classroom to do this work at a time when it is extremely difficult to find substitutes. I know I've raised that several times. And I was glad to see what's attached to our agenda to do some discussion and brainstorming on some of these issues, including what is the role of this council in terms of oversight. I know a piece of that is that we're supposed to be soliciting feedback from districts and teachers, and you know, some of that feedback is what I've brought back to the council, but I'm hearing from the people whose feedback are bringing to the council that maybe we're not being heard because it's not being reflected in the minutes. So for me, my concern now at this point is how do we move forward in a way that, inspires productive discussion and effective outcomes. And I would like this attached to the minutes.
Yeah, sure. That would actually make our job easier. If that's everything you just said. So yeah, that would be perfect. Thank you. Sure. And as we've said before, at the beginning of every meeting, we do talk about the minutes. So if you don't think it's capturing what you want it to capture, this would be the time. So thank you for bringing that forward. We can definitely do that. I think, too, what the council, we'll talk about this as we move along, obviously, is the role of the council is to support what the legislation currently is. And I think what happens is we often have conversations that come up around what's not in the legislation. So I don't know, we have to talk about what is our role with that, right? Like as a government employee, I can't go out and legislate and stomp and change, right? Or, anyway, so, obviously my job is to take the legislation, enforce the legislation, move it forward, and then support the district with the legislation. And like I said, we'll talk about the role of the council too, but I hear what you're saying, and I want you to think I don't hear what you're saying, I'm just kind of processing it out loud. And we can definitely make the minutes more, not reflective, but we can say, if you want to say.
The transcription too.
Yeah.
Because it sounds like you want us, for me to capture the entire conversation, and that would be more, more the transcription.
Oh, that's
not capture an entire conversation. I mean, I've had to tell my council clerk, please don't write every single word we say, but please capture the main issues or things that come up in conversation, because clearly we do not always agree at our council table. And I understand your role as an employee, but most of us, I think, who sit on the council are not state employees. And the legislation tells us, as the implementation council, that we have a role to be talking with the people who are impacted. I can't say why Marty Looney appointed me to this council, other than he called me and asked me to do that. I don't know which hat he wants me to wear, but I do have a teacher hat, and I do have a municipal leadership hat. And sometimes those are in conflict, but I have to pay attention to both, including when I'm sitting on this council. And so, for me, I have to always be asking myself, how do I advocate in the best way possible for my profession? And how do I also balance that with my obligation to my constituents and the people of Connecticut? And so I don't feel that I'm constrained by legislation. And legislation, and I think I've said this before, legislation is often passed with the greatest of intentions, but not a lot of, maybe not enough time to analyze impact. And this piece of legislation, happens during a special session, so I don't even know what went on around that. I think it's part of the, budget implementer.
Right. Well, there were a couple of hearings on it, yes, prior to it getting to that point,
But again, I just want to make sure that I'm doing what I've been asked to do, and that it's reflected.
So you could greatly help us then, just like you did today, if there are things in the minutes that you don't think are reflective or need to be fine-tuned, then at this time, definitely bring those up. And you can say, at the last meeting I said this, I would like that to be recorded. And that could help us too in figuring out how detailed we're going to be getting. Because like Leslie said, the two of us are trying to take notes. Absolutely. And then compiling those notes so that we can reflect what goes on during the meeting. But if you don't feel like it's capturing everything, I want to make sure that we are. So I do need your help. And just like
I'm happy to do that.
Now is great and fine, and we can attach it and we can scan this. Or you can send us a document and we can attach it that way.
However way you want. I can also forward this to you.
Yeah, that would just help. To know exactly what concerns you want on there, because you guys do speak about a lot of things, and I don't know what you guys really want in the minutes. So if you guys will say printing a sheet would be great, but if you guys can't do that, just saying, hey, you know, I want this noted in the minutes, what I'm saying.
I'm gonna send this over to you.
I think as an implementation council, we have a level of flexibility to make recommendations about how to best implement this as well, right? Laws evolve, and they evolve especially if we find barriers to implementation. Some of the things that you mentioned could very well be barriers to implementation, right? If something needs to be culturally responsive and accessible and it isn't, and that is a barrier to delivering the science of reading, then we need to make sure that we fix those barriers, right? And any other barriers, because ultimately the goal is that every child is reading by third grade.
The intention, I think, is the legislation.
All right, I'm just going to move over to the table now that I started the PowerPoint. So are there any other comments about the minutes before we move on? Any other? All right, okay, thank you very much. We'll add this and then we can post that. Okay, moving right along. All right, as you know, every time we do post the why, and I do have a question about the why that I want to work on today too while we're in person and together. But before we do that, why don't we just pause because we really haven't seen people in person. So maybe we can just do a whip around and say who we are and what we do. So if you mind, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I'm Mike Coyne. I'm a professor at UConn. My research is on early reading and literacy, instruction intervention, and supporting schools through the Connecticut literacy model for quite a while. So it's great to see everybody in person. Not everybody, but people are here. That's really nice to have.
Yeah, Doc.
Steve Hernandez, policy shop of the legislature that focuses on equity and opportunity. We are nonpartisan and we serve both chambers. So we have a level of independence and flexibility when it comes to the advice we get, focusing on our why.
Stephanie Lafferty, principal at Avon High School.
Melissa Jenkins here, served in Bridgeport Public Schools as chief academic officer.
Okay.
Pardon me, when,
Yeah, can we put it there?
come on over, and we can even do another table.
I think that would be a little. Maybe we're getting another table, is that?
Yeah, we can do it.
Melissa, you can, well, I'll do it.
Okay, all right, thank you, we got it.
Maureen Brummett, superintendent of schools in Newington.
Thomas, retired teacher and chair of the department.
Thank you. We're just introducing
Oh,
ourselves
okay.
in person.
I'm Kim Healy, and I'm parked in the wrong parking lot for the second time.
But you're here.
I'm not in my car, yeah. I hope they just let my car come out when it's done.
And just so you know, we are being recorded and it is being transcribed.
Okay.
These are microphones up here, they hear everything.
Okay.
And then it will be posted just like we post our meetings, but it is not live right now, but it is being recorded. All right, so the why. I want to talk about the why. I've been hearing people adding to the why proficiently and effectively, and I think that's because it's aligned to the Common Core standards. So I wanted to have a conversation around that. Do you all feel like that should be added to this? Do you think it should stay like this? What are you thinking?
Do you mean proficiently and effectively formal?
By the end of third grade, those words. I've been hearing, like, in the testimonies from the recent legislation, people were saying that over and over again, and I'm just wondering if that's something we should be adding to our why, if people are feeling like those words need to be going in there.
So when people were testifying to the bill to extend the time?
Correct, yes. People were saying effectively and proficiently, and I'm just like, oh, should we add that to our why? Is that something people are feeling like should be there?
When we say at grade level, because it says at or above,
Mm-hmm.
does that imply or include proficiently and effectively? I would imagine, right?
I would think so, yeah. Like I said, I'm just hearing it, and
That's because those are
Curious.
specific benchmark words.
Yeah.
So that's
people are used to.
education lingo that
Yeah.
people are gonna use.
I think this captures
Oh,
it.
do you
Yeah,
think
I
it could
think
be, everyone's then fine the way it is? Okay, all right, I just wanted to make sure, like I said. Want to make sure it's reflecting what everyone's thinking. Thank you. All right, so as you know, our why, our what, and our how. And then here are the updates. So for the staffing update, both positions were posted. One position was for 5 associate ed consultants. The other was for an administrative assistant. I believe I told you before, we got like 500 and something people for the secretary and 200 something people for the ed consultant. So we're in the process of asking questions online that then they go through and they answer yes or no to help with the pool. Because then what I need to do is I need to look at each one of the resumes that were submitted and the way that they answer their questions. From that, then we go to interviews. So those are the updates there. So it's pretty exciting. There's a lot of interest out there. A lot of interest.
At least there's someone people are getting.
Yeah, it's great. I am very excited. The professional learning and support, as you know, we talk about this every time that we get together, just so you know what we're doing at the State Department and through the center. We continue with our Connecticut Literacy Model Works, which Mike spoke about at one of our earlier meetings. ReadCon, we are in the process right now of finalizing that contract so that in the spring, we can be opening up for registration for a fall cohort. I have been asking schools to contact me if they're interested, putting them on the list so that they can get information about it. But I will be disseminating it through the superintendent memo as well. But that's very exciting. So that's getting near. Then WestEd, that's been going very well. The districts are really excited about it. I'm hearing very positive reviews. Other smaller districts are reaching out to me saying that they're hearing from their smaller district peers that this is really great, that the people with whom they're working through WestEd are meeting with them, and now they're doing walkthroughs to gather evidence and talk about their goals and doing this really great improvement cycle work. So that's been great to hear about. And then, of course, the Science of Reading Masterclass, which Fran was unable to be with us today. But Irene, do you want to talk a little bit about the Masterclass? Any updates there about the cohort coming up? Sure. Do you want me to move over? Cozy.
So, certainly in the throes of cohort 2, we're finishing out cohort 2. We are working certainly with our fiscal office and with CAPS on the development of cohort 3 and hopefully another cohort after that because people are really finding value in it, and superintendents keep continuing to ask, how can I be a part of this? So we're hoping to announce a 3rd cohort definitely coming up very soon.
That's great.
Yeah.
The basic update.
Yeah, people are really hungry for professional learning around evidence-based, scientifically based reading.
Like, I think it speaks to some of the leadership skill sets that are in the legislation to develop for district-wide implementation. So it kind of meets that need, even though the commissioner didn't create the master class with us as a result of the legislation. It was something she felt we needed to do. This is something we need to do. However, I would say that it does align with the leadership skills that we have to develop. So, yeah.
I think I asked this last time, but I was just wondering if, I think we talked about whether this was a possibility or not, of potentially maybe making some of those materials available, that, like the PowerPoints or the content, just be really nice to be able to access some of that and link it with some of the other initiatives that are going on.
We did post the look for document. So that's now posted in 2 places. So with our partners at CAPS, we created a walkthrough tool. You can purchase them through CAPS in this nifty little flip book. I didn't bring one today. But it's a spiral bound flip book. But the one online you can print off. It's a wonderful tool, and I can send you the link or share that information with you all.
And these are look-fors for scientifically based reading strategies.
And each of the areas of reading and what you should be seeing in the classroom. But it's not to be used, obviously, for any kind of evaluative purpose. It's just to assist the administrators and people who might be walking through. What does it look like? What does it sound like? What should kids be doing in a classroom?
Yeah, and I think it was specific to the transfer of practice. So here you're learning this through the master class session. Now here's how to look for that transfer when you're going through as you start to scale.
And is there a sort of, scope and sequence or agenda, or now that we're in multiple cohorts, is there a sort of, and I'm just really interested in knowing what the content is that's being delivered across the sessions in this group.
Yeah.
I mean, it feels like this is a really powerful group that's
Right,
going to be implementing a lot of changes, and it'd be good to be able to, understand how they're kind of thinking about it and what kind of information they're getting, so that we can work to align.
Yep, I think we can do that even in just a one-pager type of
Yeah,
format.
like here's an overview of like
and,
session 1 is
provide
focused on
that,
this, session 2 is focused on this.
on the center webpage, maybe. And maybe so CAPS has a landing page as well.
Yeah, do you want me to
Reading
pull that?
Masterclass.
Hold on a second.
That's okay.
Sorry.
But on the CAPS, if you Google CAPS
Yeah,
Science of
okay.
Reading, there is a dedicated website. You might get some information, but the detailed information, I think specific like to the literacy scan, it's password protected. And it's because it's for the participants of the master class to have access to it, because there's a fee associated with it. It's under contract. But I think easily, just kind of like an overview, one pager of like you said, what does each session focus on? And it's very deliberate, so I think we can do that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And then all of the literacy initiatives that are currently going on are purposely similar. So you won't be surprised by seeing what this content is based on the work you're doing with the Connecticut Literacy Model. And, we very purposely are threading them together so that if you were to attend any of these, you will be hearing the same stuff across.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm on the CAPS website now, you can definitely get an overview by kind of poking around.
Yeah.
And, I mean, maybe the council could get access to more specific materials. Again, I'm thinking particularly about, say, the center working with districts, providing, different kinds of literacy training, and at the same time, superintendents are getting this kind of training, and without really having detailed information about the content that both groups are getting, it's going to be hard. I mean, I believe that they're highly aligned, but just being able to sometimes even refer to a certain graphic or something that superintendents have seen, to be able to say to principals or to teachers, this is the same framework model that like district leaders have heard about. We're using the same language, the same graphics, same strategies. So I don't think it necessarily has to be available to everybody, but it would be great if there were some ways that folks that are involved in kind of developing or leading or delivering each of these district or these state initiatives could really be aware of the content across all of them.
Well, and I know Fran invited everybody too. Remember how she invited everyone to attend it in person?
Yeah.
So we'll talk, we meet with them every week.
Do that again, yeah.
Yeah, so we'll meet with them and we'll get back to the something.
Yeah, I'd really just I'd like to see the content.
And there's some that are still being developed, so too.
Yeah.
Because you know how things take time,
Yeah, sure.
just like with ReadCon. So when we were developing ReadCon, we also were very purposeful in tying to the Connecticut Literacy Model work, and Mike, Margie, Darcy were all ones who were physically reviewing those materials and involved in that way. This project's a little different because, like Irene said, this is not coming directly from the center, but we are making sure that everything is aligned across with the evidence-based, science-based reading practices.
Yeah, thank you.
Can I follow up on that with two questions? So, one question is, how is all of that work integrating with teacher certification programs in our colleges and universities, especially our public ones who might have more access? So I'm curious about that. And then going back again to, we have all this incredible work going on in our state with our stakeholders. How is it that we don't trust that can become what we need versus asking districts to buy into something commercial? That just still keeps sort of, I can't get that out of my head. I mean, I know I personally, I don't know how many others of you have actually were in a classroom any period of time. I know Stephanie was because we're in the same district. We spent a lot of time developing curriculum. I mean, in Windsor, it was intense. The whole math curriculum, at least at the elementary level there, was basically, we developed it. And have continuous professional development in it and are held accountable to it. And it's easy to hold us accountable to it because everybody knows what it is and it's consistent. And I just imagine at a statewide level, if one of the things that is so critical is to be able to hold districts accountable to achieving these goals. And how much easier is it if we're all under the same umbrella? And maybe I'm just misunderstanding, but
Well, I'm just trying to,
Yeah.
I was trying to understand your question, because first you say that, I think what you were saying is PD versus investment in programs, but then you say being under the same umbrella, which means consistency.
So if we had, and my understanding is happening, something that was developed
The science
in-house.
masterclass?
The programming, the curriculum can come out of that. The reading curriculum can come out of all these incredible talents we have in our state.
So you have to go back to the legislation. What was first was to review and approve at least 5 curriculum models or programs by a certain date. That was the target. That was the work of the CSD, and that's what we were charged with, and that's what we did. And we did it with the council. We tried to make it as inclusive as possible, but also at a very high level, so that we were benchmarked against state organizations such as, we talked with folks from the Connecticut Literacy Model, benchmarked against Rhode Island, Massachusetts. You've heard this before, Colorado, right? And we're very proud of the process that was put in place, and some council members were even reviewers.
Right.
So, again, you have to go back to the legislation, and if at any point that wasn't the right work, then it's a call for other folks to talk with legislators. Right?
Which is what some of us have been doing.
Yeah, we've been doing that.
Right,
So
but I'm
some of us
just saying,
testify,
you
not as members of this council.
I'm just saying respectfully that there was a process that's in law, and what we do is implement and through that law, and that's what we did. That's what Melissa was leading. And part of it too, part of the commissioner's commitment to just scientifically research-based and evidence-based reading is that we need to build our staff too. So that's why she created the master class. It was a team effort. Yes, they intersect, but it was just a different call to action, I suppose. She didn't need legislation to tell her to create that master class.
Right.
But
that was
as we
before.
Right, it was going
on.
Exactly. So I think as we've implemented and continue to scale the master class, there's that realization, right? And I think it's an evolution. You realize that how awesome it could have been if this is where we started, but that was not the legislation. So we're doing everything we can to uphold that legislation.
And I think also, the way I think about programs or instructional materials or platforms is they don't replace the kind of work that goes into what's happening in the master class or understanding about the science review.
Oh, right.
These are tools that support the sort of enactment of people's understanding. No one can come out of a science of reading training thinking that that we should be asking teachers to design materials that are going to teach all the sort of foundational skills, K through 5, every day across the year. That's not what teachers' jobs are. Teachers' jobs to teach, not to develop tools and materials that are going to support kids meeting benchmarks, right? So I think the tricky thing with this a little bit is, like you were saying, the timing of how these things rolled out. The idea of programs and tools and materials should be as tools and supports for schools and teachers to enact and implement the work that they're learning through various teacher training, science of reading, master class, ReadCon. Those are all the kind of, we all know that tools and materials don't implement themselves. Like, that's not a solution, but it's a piece of someone's toolkit to be able to move that forward.
And I think what we've learned through the master class, and just even from the Connecticut Literacy Model, honestly, where it started, that if you develop the capacity, it doesn't matter what program is in front of the teacher, because they have that skill set, they can then, with confidence and with those skills,
But it does matter,
implement.
because the program materials have
I'm
to
just
meet
saying,
the criteria,
whatever the district chooses to then implement, they can be assured that those teachers have confidence and skills to implement what's before them.
Yeah.
But yes, choosing the program is another.
Right, that's a whole other skill set, right?
Yeah.
So identifying the program or the materials that best meet that school or district's unique needs or context.
So yes, looking at the list, the district can choose any one of those. Again, if you're developing the skill set, then those teachers could.
Right, because we've been adamant throughout putting materials in the hand of someone. They need to understand and they need that learning. It goes back to that old saying of the teacher-student content, right? So many of us were trained on the teacher, the student, the content. And if you change one thing, right, you have to change something else. And this is the same thinking, right? So the legislation is saying people need to be putting in place these scientific practices. And when you read on, it also says that people need to be getting professional learning about this. I do think what's happened, like you had mentioned too, because that was the first legislative mandate that we had to get done, all the focus was on that. So much focus was on that. And other layers that are wound into the legislation were not addressed, because we have the assessment piece. We need to have assessments in place that are driving instruction, and we're getting data from that that's actually usable, right? Not just assessing for the purpose of saying I did an assessment. And then using those data to drive the instruction, using those scientifically based tools that the teachers, the administrators have been trained to understand what needs to come out of this instruction. And I think the whole triad kind of got lopsided in the process of all this. So I can't speak for the legislators who wrote the legislation. I wouldn't think it's a lack of trust. I know you said that word trust, because I'm an educator, right? I was a secondary teacher for a long time. I was a middle school teacher. Prior to coming here, I was an educator in the classroom and in central office. And I worked hard. I did work hard, because oftentimes I was not able to access tools that could actually help the kids in front of me. So I had to do it on my own. I had to go and get my master's in special ed. I had to make materials on the weekends and at night, and if there's a way, and I was not a person, I was that teacher in second grade who took my basil and shoved it to the side and only brought it out if an administrator came by. I have to be honest. Because at that time, it was a very different type of material. But now, getting into all these materials and really reviewing, they do offer tons of things. They offer materials for kids of all different abilities, where they are. For those who may be advanced in the grade level, for those who are struggling, for kids who might have an IEP, special needs. They do offer so many more materials and professional learning built into it that they're much better than they were, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And then there was something else that you had said that triggered a thought in my head about, it's not that we don't trust, because we do. I'm an educator. I trust my fellow educators. I do. They are doing what they're doing based on what they have. Right?
There are two universes that we're afraid of, right? And I think one may be more present than the other. The other one may be more of a mythology. But the first universe that I'm afraid of is you have this Cadillac program, whether it's one of the 6 or whatever it is that you have in front of you that's approved. and then you think that your work is done, right? To your point about implementation, to your point about having the right training in place, right? So that's the first worry, because there are districts who now have these resources in front of them, and I don't want them to think that, okay, we've moved on, right? Because they still need to do the work.
Right.
And I also worry about those districts who say, look, we have our way of doing this, we have our tools that we have adopted, and we don't need anything else. I think what each of those districts could benefit from, because there's a process now, there's this waiver process, right? And there's also the process of selecting those districts that have these tools in front of them that have already been pre-approved. I want to make sure that both of those districts have technical assistance to do this work. Because without the technical, they're not going to get anywhere. Without the implementation side, without the right training, without all the other wraparound, there is a problem when, you know, and you didn't do this, but the way the legislation was written put you in the position where deadlines were coming up, right? And of course, you keep getting pushed to meet those deadlines. And everybody now from the outside thinks, oh, it's just all about programs. And each and every one of us here just knows that it's not.
Yeah, and to your point, I think going back to the staffing update, so she's working very hard to get the 5 education consultants, and that's just the state terminology for that role, which would provide the technical assistance. So we've already been thinking about how could you deploy those 5 consultants across the state to provide that just-in-time technical assistance, whether it's about the skills, the program, or how you marry those two. And I'm just thinking of early adopters right now, what we're hearing from Connecticut that are in the master class and have adopted early a program. Combined, they are saying it's created such a difference. Because now they have knowledge, more knowledge to actually implement or know what to look for within a program. They know which questions to ask now where they didn't know those before, and they feel like, oh my God, and they're saying, oh my gosh,
Right.
I feel like a better teacher for my students, and what have I done before? You know, teachers always take it on themselves, right, to say, and reflective, right, to say, what I was doing before was wrong. No, it's just those were the decisions that were made at the time that were perfectly fine and logical. We just know more now. So staffing, yes, agreed that technical assistance from the FDE in partnership with so many, right, is going to be huge. But we have more work to do this in the legislation.
Right.
So
there's another thing I worry about when a district with all earnestness comes to request a waiver, right? And they do a landscape analysis of what they have in front of them. This is what we're doing. This is what we have. This is what we put together as a district. This is the level of success we've had. We could do better. But to be honest with you, we don't know how to do better. So what are we missing in our implementation science that's going to allow us to do better, whether it's to reach those kids that need special education, targeted special education, whether we need to reach kids who are new to the district. So that type of assistance, that granular assistance, where we don't just say to a district, sorry you failed, you don't get a waiver, right? That's what I'm looking for.
I don't think that's how we're perceiving it. We are hopeful that it continues to cultivate a good partnership in the work. I think it's still changing hearts and minds out there from those that are submitting the waiver to understand it isn't just to check off a box and that you're done. How from that waiver process, as Melissa's been saying, and the commissioner's been saying all along, that we've learned from your waiver submission, but also what did it reveal to you? So that's what we're waiting for. We don't know that story just yet. I hope it gets there. I hope there's potential in the waiver process to reveal that we learn this about ourselves, and hopefully that they'll be vulnerable enough to say, we need support. But I don't think we know that just yet.
And it's on us to build that trust, because I think with giving more time and providing that technical assistance, that's how we're actually.
That is the aim of the commissioner with that proposal, so that it gives, she'll say more runway for us, runway for district. And then, yes, there's that full implementation proposal by July 25. Yeah.
Are you talking about 1094?
Yes.
I think will come out of this, either this committee or the one that, I don't know how long this committee will meet, but when you eventually got your full staffing, that there'll be like a model reading curriculum that districts can use?
There will, so we're creating the English language arts model curriculum.
Okay.
And we're going to deploy units. But what people have to understand, and And I'm very protective of curriculum because it could either be like the cornerstone, the backbone of the district, right? But it can also be the scapegoat. And the scapegoat in that it's the fault of our challenges in district. When we value and understand the details of curriculum, then we can talk about it in different ways. So the English Language Arts model curricula is based off of our CSDE design principles. And those units that we're developing are designed by the standards. And yes, within those standards speaks to science of reading, foundational reading skills, and so on. But without those resources and tools, how might they? They're not going to provide, as CSDE model curricula, they're not going to provide targeted resources to do what we're asking all of you to do. So yes, it can be part of the suite of resources, but it's not to replace. And I don't anticipate it then becoming one of the approved programs on the list, because it does not, it will not, we cannot provide targeted reading materials, libraries, these targeted resources, the TE, however it's packaged, we can't do that. But what we can guarantee is a very comprehensive, high quality model curricula, which we've already proven with our math that we've deployed for 3.8, with more to come, that we can lift the level of thinking about those standards, how to think about multilingual learners across all things in curriculum, not just an afterthought, that it's truly embedded, and how to help students demonstrate their learning. So again, you can still have that program, but now how might they really demonstrate and transfer practice and develop those skills and give them multiple means of demonstration, not just a one-time assessment. And so yes, we'll have a model curriculum, but I do not, the way we are doing it now, and honestly, in my heart, I think you need both, but you need to be very intentional about that alignment and use of it. So, yeah, I don't see it replacing.
I appreciate that.
Yeah,
One thing I've noticed
work.
as I converse with people, because I'm on this committee,
Yeah.
is many districts, and I'm not going to name them, do not have a curriculum for reading, do not even have a program. They just are a little of this, a little of that. And those are the districts, I think, that probably welcome this legislation, because they sort of compel them to do something. I was stunned by that.
Yeah.
But,
yeah, if there's that potpourri effect, then yeah, what are you yielding from that? So I hope there's potential in when we release, we're going to release 3.5 first, so really it's kind of not going to quite assist in this K2 arena, but we'll follow quickly with K2. We will be very intentional about the deployment, that you can see how it supports you with English language arts and just the ability to demonstrate your learning from those standards, because ultimately that's what's tested in the statewide summative assessment, right? But you need that targeted, focused, core set of resources that the curriculum just will not be able to provide, or we're not in that position.
And I do think for districts and schools, you know, the assumption that their job is to recreate the wheel and do all those things themselves, I think is an unrealistic expectation, right? You know, you have Common Core state standards. I mean, the kids develop reading and you know, we know the benchmarks and standards and outcomes that we want to see for, say, like foundational reading skills over time. That doesn't change from district to district, right? We know what to expect from kids. We also know, like, really good assessments to assess, and the state is able to do the work of deciding whether there's technical validity and psychometrics of those. There's a range of curriculum materials that are aligned with standards and, you know, are comprehensive in there. So it's more about schools and districts being able to understand what's available to them and how to think about a comprehensive plan that pulls from those resources that we already have, but makes it unique for that school or district, because no district is the same. But it's instead of recreating the wheel for, like, we need to build our own assessments, we need to build our own outcomes, we need to create our own materials. It's what are the needs of our students, where are our teachers, how do we pull these together through a comprehensive plan, where that's what makes it unique for the school.
And I think we can assist with that comprehensive plan when we have both resources. Remember, we've got parallel streams of work happening, and the K-8 model happened at the same time as the reading legislation. So, we're kind of competing with ourselves.
Right.
But it does seem
But
like
it's all good
the
work.
same
It's all
resources
good
are
work.
gonna be able, like, schools and teachers and leaders can have trust that the things that the state
Absolutely.
is saying are consistent with the science of reading, have technical validity, are gone through all these kind of processes.
So another piece to it, much like what we've done with math already in grades 6 through 8, we did a statewide scan of what programs our districts use. I know in the math world right now. That yielded at least 7 or 8 that are used with frequency across the state. We then pulled those publishers together and we gave them our units of study and said, now you show us how you align. And we gave them a grid of how they had to fill out. It's all online. And it came back with kind of an alignment document by each math program. And what is interesting, it did show us that you cannot go from page 1 to page 100 to achieve these standards, right? But it did show us unit by unit our progression that we've put in place, which is based on the standards and certainly developmentally how students progress in mathematics. But that company intentionally showed us where their resource intentionally aligns. We're going to do the same with reading. So with the English language arts curriculum, when we get to the K2 piece, now we might consider taking these programs, where does it align, so that teachers don't feel like, to your point, Dr. Coyne, that we're not all over the place and these are disparate pieces, but if I am doing this unit, then how does that program actually align and support? And there may be opportunities, I'll call it opportunities, or times when the program might have to come first because of what's expected, because there's a scientific way to use that program, right? But the units are there side by side supporting, as is the program is side by side supporting. So we will continue to do that work. I don't know how it'll look, but there's, again, possibilities there. A very long answer to your question.
Well, and I remembered you had mentioned teacher prep also.
Oh,
So
yeah.
with the teacher prep, we've been working with, so Irene, academic office, Melissa Center in the academic office, have been working with the talent office who oversees certification and working with higher education. We've been working together and working with the higher ed institutions. The last meeting was in January, where actually it was created with Dr. Maureen Ruby, who was the superintendent and is now at Sacred Heart. And we met to discuss reading, the programs, the models, what is the science of reading. And it was just an amazing conversation talking about majors in literacy and how can that be established. And they were so excited and hungry that we're going to be meeting again in the spring to talk about problems of practice around literacy and preparing our teachers for going into the field. The thing that some of the teachers are running up against is that the way in which they're prepared and then when they actually get out in the field is different than what they were taught.
Right.
So that's some of the struggles, so that's why we're working closely with, but we are establishing those relationships and we are moving that work forward. So that is being addressed.
I would add, yes, we are meeting, we're having these lovely conversations, but it's very intentional about the course sequence at higher ed. That is part of the legislation. There's another set of legislation, even, forget the bill number, but it's with the dyslexia work.
Right,
That
we've been working
also
closely with
requires
Jewel,
that
who presented here, right? So you all met Jewel virtually.
So, that's work that's also present and ongoing. It's just working with the deans of higher ed, meeting with them, but ultimately, it has to get to the very intentional work of what does the syllabi look like? What does the course sequence look like? They would have to, so higher ed would have to do that internal analysis of how are our courses preparing our undergrads or maybe grads.
Right, yeah, grads as well.
That analysis would be done in conjunction with the work of this council and the center?
I'm not sure because of the way it's written. I mean, that we have to figure that out, but.
Our function, I know, remember, can you visualize the grid? You know that grid I always show with the check marks?
Oh, yeah.
Right, so the grid with the check marks of the work. In that are two pieces around the higher education, and one is basically to inform them, and the other is to eventually see who's doing it and gathering information around that. So that's kind of as deep as we go, but listening, being educators as we are, and listening to the conversation before, we've been really pulled into a partnership, and not only meeting with deans, but also with professors. And, you know, those who are really on the ground doing the work with their deans. So,
Yeah, I think,
so there's a lot in this legislation that is required for the center to do and for you all.
and for the
to be-
dyslexia office to do.
Yeah.
So it may not happen
Consulting.
here, but it would happen out of the dyslexia office.
Right,
Because it's to
to build that
diagnose
piggyback.
and to,
Right,
those skills for teachers.
right. So they have a lot on their
Mhm.
side to be working with the higher ed. And then you had mentioned the cultural, I'm sorry, go ahead.
A while back, you had mentioned that one of the, I guess, one of the outcomes of that master class is that whoever attends can then turn around and be trainers. Was that something that you mentioned? Or looking at implementation? Okay, so that's not what.
No.
Have there been any discussions or talks about maybe creating like a bank of people who can then go out and do some of this training work? Because, you know, it's like in education, all of a sudden this SEL becomes a buzzword and like everybody, oh, I've been doing SEL training for 30 years. And like, what's you gonna think 30 years ago? Same thing when the DEI things started rolling out and everyone's now an equity trainer. So
Yes.
is that something that we're thinking about doing as we go through these trainings and these master classes and all these organizations that are providing this literacy work? Can we get a group of people and maybe some teachers who volunteer to go through these courses and say, yes, now I can kind of go and work with districts and be consultants, or is that the work of the education consultants that you're hiring?
So, yes, that will be the work of the education consultant. We haven't really talked about picking people from the field. You know, we would have to really explore that because then we'd have to pay them and figure out how do you do that. And usually we can't directly pay them, so then we have to go through another entity. Anyway, it's never easy. But it's very intriguing what you bring up, and I appreciate that. And what I want to share too is the grant opportunity that's coming up, because pretty soon all districts will have access to virtual training through our literacy partners. So in a way, they are the ones who are doing this at now a bigger scale than just with the Alliance district. And they have trained coaches on staff that can spread the word in that way.
I just want to go back to the master class. So one of the outcomes is, it was very intentional that the superintendent picked their district literacy team. That literacy team is charged with scaling it within their district, not to turnkey it outside their district, because they want to get to 100%, let's say. Like, if you want to do it by numbers, by project plan, scope of work, you know, brass tacks. If they have a strong team that have been together throughout, shoulder to shoulder, like, I'll use Derby as an example, because I know Matt Conway has attended everyone, and he's there working with his team. They are actually refining their literacy plan in the moment, and then the job for that group is to scale it at their district level so that 100% of their district. So kind of selfishly not worrying about people around them, they're just like worrying about within. So that was the aim for the master class. Now we can continue to do cohort after cohort after cohort. We actually scoped it out. I think it ended up being, if we were doing really well with cohort, it would potentially be 2027 by the time we got to 100% across the state. That's not realistic, or maybe it is, I don't know. But that would, like, if we were trying to see if we could continue this, how long would it take us? It would potentially take till 2027.
And then the cultural piece, you mentioned that too. So I had sent to all of you the memo or the letter that went out to districts around the questions that have really been bubbling up around the cultural relevancy of the materials and the New York study. So one of the things that I really was focusing in on in that memo is the importance of having trained staff, because as we said time and time again, nothing is perfect, right? You need to have, and you've all been saying that here too, probably more eloquently than I can say right now, but you need to have the trained staff who can be looking at the materials that they have, looking at the needs of the students and then working to ensure that what they're doing is scientifically based, evidence-based, culturally responsive. When we did the review, as those who were on the committee and reviewers know, we added questions based on Massachusetts around those pieces. They weren't legislated, those questions, but here in Connecticut, we know it's really important that the materials do address the cultural relevancy, that they do look at the titles of the books, the authors of the books, who is being represented here. Now, with the New York study, they were looking at them and saying, well, this has 48%, this has like 52%, but that's why you need to have training in districts so that teachers can understand if they're not seeing materials or how they can choose materials. Some of the curriculum models that we have available have multiple titles from which districts can choose. So once again, you need to have those teachers who are trained and understand those moves that they need to be making, the materials that they need to be choosing, so that if they feel like the program or the model or the curriculum they're given does not have all those elements, that they can then add to it, administrators too. So that's basically a summary of what the memo was saying.
Just go back, sorry, just trying to get the numbers around my head. You said 2027, it would take until 2027 to...
Potentially, if we were
train.
scoping it out, if we had, and that was working on those different numbers. So when we finally landed, we landed with 12 districts per cohort. I think we were working with a benchmark number of 15 districts per cohort.
Right, but not every district needs to go through the training. I mean, there are districts in the state that are doing just fine. Correct?
I don't know how we define
Right.
fine.
Right.
And not every district in the state needs to change what they're doing.
Again, I don't know that. I mean, if 10% of your students are still not performing at or above, that's 10% of your kids not performing at or above.
Right.
Which is 10% too many, you know, so I don't know how we define fine.
And I feel like, too, there's nothing wrong with when you go to professional learning, you know, and I remember, like, even as a teacher, like, oh, I have to go to professional learning. I already know this. But when you're sitting there, you don't know it all. You don't. Like, there's no way we can know it all. I'll take myself. And when I go to something, there's always something that I walk away with that might be new, that might resonate with me, that might make me want to explore deeper, something I question and go, wait a second, this doesn't sound right, and compare to my work. So I feel like anyone can benefit from quality, research-based, evidence-based, aligned professional learning. Maybe that's a teacher in me.
But don't most teachers get lots of professional training?
I don't know that.
It depends on the
track
district. I mean, we have a superintendent, a chief academic officer here. I mean, it varies based on the board goals. It varies on
So your
what
teachers
family
don't always
they.
have I mean, my
Well, they have
kids seem
professional
to be
learning.
off from school for professional development, so I mean, that's.
Yeah, we do.
Shoulder, a lot of it, ton of it.
I'm just saying there might be competing priorities at the district level based on whatever the board goals might be, or what the need is of that particular district and what the focus areas were. 'Cause, you know.
Right, like you were saying around, okay, this year it's this, and next year it's that, and how do we bring this together?
And some of the professional development things are not actually, professional development could be curriculum writing or teachers working together on different things. So it doesn't always mean they're getting someone saying this is a new way of doing things or consider this.
All right.
I'll just add this, and
Oh, sure.
I want to move on, is the culturally responsive pedagogy as well, that
Yes.
even with a fabulous reading program, if it's not sensitive, and I would mean that about any of our literature, whether it's
Absolutely.
social studies
Math,
or ELA.
anything.
Yeah, that's huge, especially as every district becomes more diverse.
Correct.
I think that's gotta be a huge
Right.
piece.
100% agree. And just so you all know too, is the letter that I wrote, I emailed and sent to all the publishers of our approved programs, saying that our reviewers found that your materials have some evidence, but not a preponderance of, and you need to consider this and support our joint statement. And that statement was created with the board, CAP, CAVE, et cetera, so that they know we're really serious about this, you know, you need to be doing this. But once again, I mean, I hate to say this, but it does fall upon those who are using the materials in the district. You really need to be looking to see, is this reflecting like our portrait of the graduate too? You know, like everything aligns to your strategic plan, things like that, your beliefs. So absolutely, absolutely. And that's across the board, all materials, all instruction. I know that our council is geared and looking just at the language arts, but I mean, that's an excellent point. Math, social studies, everywhere, absolutely.
When we are sitting here talking about professional development around this science of reading piece, who are we envisioning as delivering that?
So that's why I'm sharing this. So far, these are the people that we have that have been delivering. So Recon has been going on since I first started here, so 7 years. That does piggyback with the reading survey that is mandated by law. So that is to assist teachers so that if, and aligns with the science of reading, and we're actually going to be updating it to align to the newest Pearson reading test. So with the survey data, that is to support teachers and coaches in understanding what is that evidence-based literacy instruction, how do we do it, and its modules online with coaches, coaching online. Wested is something that was offered to us for free, so we've been engaging with them.
Connecticut Literacy Model has been a long time.
Right, and that focuses on the Alliance districts and opportunity districts. Prior to the center work, this was our only line in our budget for the academic office. It supported this work because the legislators, the Black and Puerto Rican Caucus, are so adamant that literacy is important. And that all kids need to be raised.
So you can see the 3 key partners, UConn, Health for Literacy, and Literacy House, and then employ folks to do that work.
Right, train coaches to go into schools and districts and support with all the elements. Really, so the first one, the Connecticut Literacy Model, Wested, and the masterclass deals with not only learning about the content, but also how do we build structures. How do we build structures so that it lasts? It's not just learning, you walk in, you get, you leave. You're actually doing things as a result and setting up structures, like literacy plans, creating, and I know Mike reported out on all this in one of our meetings, but creating a district literacy,
But I think specifically with the master classes, you have national experts in the field. So Heidi has Heidi
I'm not
Messer.
questioning actually the quality of these or what they do. I was kind of going another place with my question.
I misunderstood. I thought you meant like who were we working with?
Yeah, I think we've talked.
Right.
So then my next question is, are we then working from the assumption that these 4 entities are capable and expected to provide, and this is a 2-part question, to provide all the PD across the state? It's a 3-part question, sorry. To provide all the PD across the state, what is the cost associated with it for districts?
Nothing.
And the reason I ask that is because right up until the day I retired in July 2021, at least where I was working, we had really moved away from bringing in anybody from the outside to conduct professional development, and it was all on the shoulders of our coaches and interventionists. And that I don't think I can hesitate to say was a budgetary constraint in many ways. It was also part of saying, let's bring it in-house because we know our students. So I don't know what you think first.
Right.
So this is also a shift, I think, at least for some districts. I don't know what's happening in your district.
It's a combination.
So I'm just wondering, can we meet demand?
So this is all free. The way we meet demand is by our kind, lovely legislators putting more money into our budget so that we can then employ people who can go out and do those things. And,
Is embedding still part of it, though? I think it's part of it.
Yeah, and I think to my point with the Science of Reading Masterclass, if you scope it out, how many years would it take to get there? So is that even feasible? We don't know. But then what's layered in it is this West Ed approach and that partnership, and layered in is ReadCon.
right,
So could Connecticut Literacy Model, for Dr. Coyne and his team, and do the entire state? Again, this is where we are right now, trying to build a system of support.
right.
At the local level, coaches and interventionists who might have already been trained in a number of the skills already with Science of Reading. So I don't want to name names because sometimes you say a name and then names stick, right? But let's say they have that skill set. Why not? If you have trust in those folks and they've been doing the work all along, then districts might have taken a moment to say, well, how do we bring our interventionists and our literacy coaches, instructional coaches together to then be proactive, and let's build our literacy PD plan, right? And we're going to shift things a little bit. So it may have taken instructional coaches maybe away from other one-on-one teacher type of work, and now we're going to scale in a different way. But, that's great that districts are doing that and reevaluating the assets in districts to do that locally.
Yeah, I think,
Yes, go
okay.
on.
I think you bring up really two important things here at different levels, right? It's all about building capacity. And one of them is building capacity at the state level to really be able to, and the big theme today is that schools and districts and teachers need technical assistance and professional learning to do the things that we're talking about. And so part of it is the center, which is an incredible commitment already to say we're building capacity at the state level to provide what districts and schools need to do this. But I think the other piece, which is really important, is that these efforts, the goal isn't just to kind of rely on the state to do these things, it's to build internal capacity in districts and schools so that can sustain over time with internal funding and expertise. And I think, one of the goals isn't that you have to spend a lot more money on it. It's reevaluating how you're allocating personnel and time and resources. And I think a lot of the goals of all of these types of initiatives are to help schools and districts work smarter with their internal capacity, and so that there's a influx of or initial outside supports that then fade over time, so that the internal structures can. So I think those are two big, state capacity and local capacity are both key pieces of this.
And then, Dr. Jenkins, if you don't mind, I'm calling you. Well, I know that you're using one of the programs, and I know you've been rolling it out in a very certain way, and I'm just wondering if you would share with us how your district, I've worked in big districts, I've worked in small districts, and you have a large shift, right? But that's your steering. So do you mind, if you don't mind, sharing about, structurally or strategically how you've gone about doing that, so that if you do end up going somewhere else, how that will sustain? Not that she is not. But that's what a great leader does. But that's what a great leader does, right? So you position it so that even if you're not there, the work continues. And those are those important structures. So can you talk about the structures that you've put in place, the professional learning? You hired someone as a coach, right, like a data coach.
Just trying to think of how to enter it. I think our needs are unique because we're urban, one of the largest urbans. And so I probably approached it mostly through the multi-tiered systems of support because of the why. It's about every student. And so we have a large population of multilingual learners, from 20 to 30% per grade. We spend $90 million on special education, and wondering, are we contributing to over-identification? So the need to establish multi-tiered systems of support is larger than the right to read legislation. It's around, meeting the needs of all children within our district. So a core program for Bridgeport was critical because of student transiency, and it became a tool to support maybe students having a welcoming instructional core, because no matter where they go, they move across the district, that's a common thread. So identifying high quality instructional materials became a tool for supporting our children, as well as the teachers with foundational resources. We knew instruction needed to be explicit and systematic. Like, not everyone was teaching, say, phonics in the same order. And we know that skills with learning to read have to be systematic. There's a specific order for teaching them. So developing a system to support our children became critical. I note that there are many concerns around the core program not meeting the needs of, say, ELA instruction. So it's not the only thing that we do. We've built out some project-based learning to support students developing executive functioning skills, to support motivation, engage. There are different aspects of children we want to develop. So curriculum writing, maybe ebbs and flows as a result of funding, but it gives teachers choices and voice. So 2 weeks ago, I went to see Bottle Buddy presentations, so, they're choosing text for Black History Month, they prepare the text, they do a whole presentation, but they have an artistic flair to it. So I think that sometimes, the core program is just the core program for those basic skills, those foundational reading skills and standards. It does support some of the other standards with characterization, developing close reading, inferring. So there are other components of the standards, but there are some components of curriculum in helping children to develop love of text that it necessarily needs some enhancement. You need to buy some extra books. So, but buying books to support some of those core texts. But I will say some of the systems we're putting in place and we're looking at is time, how we schedule, so we can leverage resources more effectively. So that's going to be a big push. Looking at time for teachers to have common planning time. So that's a professional development structure that we needed to put in place. Because from my experience, the best professional development is the PD closest to the classroom. So looking at professional learning, at those common planning times where teachers can problem solve together. Like I said, we're looking at the schedule. So if we have staggered blocks across grades, our ESL teachers, our resource teachers can be there to support, because we have a funding crisis too. We may not necessarily always have interventionists, but we know we're going to have the mandated ESL teachers, and we're going to have the mandated, if we can hire them, resource teachers, so they can provide some small group instruction to children. So while we definitely want to build the infrastructure for coaching, we know that our fiscal constraints may not allow for it. So we have to look at that big block of time that we do have a resource, and how do we leverage that 90-minute block. I know teachers, I was visiting a school, today is Tuesday, right? So
Today is Tuesday, Monday.
And, you know, teachers do want more guidance on when they do whole group, when they do small group instruction, how much time, what happens in whole group, how can they make it more engaging. So I think that the big block of time as a resource for the school and the classroom, we're looking at as an innovation because I think we've taken it for granted. And I read recently Tim Shanahan's blog. He was talking about leveraging time more strategically.
Yes.
And so time for instruction, time for teachers' professional development, time for supporting diverse learners in our classrooms. I mean, we've leveraged technology as a resource as well. I mean, we use Lexia as a tool. We've used that professional learning that comes with that purchase to begin to support teachers in upper grades as well. So those are some of the things we're doing. I mean, we've had professional learning with the Hill for Literacy for K-3. I won't say there hasn't been resistance. I've had numerous roundtables with one of the largest teachers unions of the district.
Believe you, said there was no resistance.
Right. Right. There's some resistance, but I think having the roundtables and being consistent and addressing some of the challenges, making sure teachers always have the resources. They said, you want me to use this resource, then I'm missing this, I'm missing that, and closing gaps. Because unfortunately, somebody leaves the district, sometimes they take the resource.
Correct.
So now putting in places strategies to make sure resources stay with the class, and even if they move, that's a concern the teachers have. Making sure when the coaching occurred, there was trust, because not having a coach from our district became a challenge. So identifying multiple entry points for coaching, it didn't have to necessarily be this way. On a continuum, what are some ways in which teachers can enter coaching? It could be through demonstration first, and then they're going to co-teach. But if they're not ready for release, that teacher had a voice in when they would take ownership. So, like I said, just because it began as top-down, but when the union voice emerged, it became a bottom-up, and then the meeting. So not just using, say, quantitative data, but using like empathy interviews as a tool to move the work. We did provide support for principals. One good thing, our teachers may turn over, but our leaders don't. So that's a strength for us.
Right.
We keep our leaders.
Dr. Jenkins has not expressed that she is leaving.
No.
I know exactly. I was just talking about structures in place that are so important.
But it is truly important. I mean, I'm in my 31st year. I don't know if I'm going to do like 45 years. So I think the building, building capacity is critical. So that, if I choose to leave, retire in 4 years, I could retire and know that there's system.
Right.
So that's why entering from the MTSS lens was really important. It complements some of the work the state's done with MTSS out of the social emotional department, because we want to support the whole child.
Right, which goes your strategic plan, and your support for the graduate.
So I think your snapshot helps paint the picture for those that are watching, that it isn't just, there's a lot of pieces to building that infrastructure to support this. So it's not just more PD or more this, more this, more this. It really does need, again, valuing the details of the work to get to the place that you're at. And I know you're not where you want to probably be.
No.
For work to do, but
But
Yeah.
change takes time, and that's why we so appreciate with the legislation that's currently out there about moving the dates, so that we can be supporting districts with this change and having more time to be able to do that. I know that our time, senior time, is up already. It is 2:30. We're going to table the rest so that when we have more of our colleagues right with us, we can really start diving into goals. But based on this conversation, and also I just want to give you all a shout out, the strategy is a thing of beauty. I have black and white copies here. I know I sent you the information, but I hope you've looked at it. It is beautiful. The next time we get together, we're going to dive deeper into it. So, you know, if you want to kind of get prepared ahead of time, looking at this and thinking about what could be our goals for the next coming year. I know that this is a K-3 strategy. It does say in legislation we need to be developing K-12. So we can think about how are we going to be adding to this. That's just something in my head. Other than that, you know, I would love to have a conversation around the goals. So although we didn't get to do the activities and things, we will table all that until we have a fuller meeting. And yeah, you can come right here. I can either pass them out or you can grab. But we'll officially stop now. Well, the next meeting is May 16th, right? And we're going to be virtual. Correct. We're going to go virtual.
Thank you all. Yep.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
See you.